Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. My name is Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode is the one, the only, Alex Fast of TripFlix and PitcherList.com. Alex, welcome to the show, my friend.
In that order, baby. In that order. That's what I'm going to make everyone introduce me to every podcast in that way. I am very happy to be here. I'm honored that you thought of me to talk Baltimore Orioles because, hey, baby, it might be our time. Not this year, but soon. It could be our time, and that gets me very excited.
It should get you very excited. This is a very exciting team and time to be a Baltimore Orioles fan. You and I have discussed previously that I actually grew up in the DC area when the Nationals did not exist, and so the team I kind of rooted for and grew up with was the Baltimore Orioles. I was there during Cal Ripken's streak, and I remember the home run ball that was or wasn't, depending on what side of the fence you want to sit on that one.
God.
The Orioles are a team after my own heart, and of course, my longtime love, Cedric Mullins, is on the Baltimore Orioles. So,
seriously, you stuck with the black and orange too.
I did. Black and orange. I've got a Cedric Mullins jersey.
I'll take it.
I love it. For those who don't know who you are, which I can't imagine is anyone at this point, remind them where you reach the social media and then talk about what you do over at Pitcher List.
Sure, yeah. So you can find me over at Twitter at AlexFast8. Over at Pitcher List right now, a lot of my responsibilities are talking with Nick about what the future of Pitcher List looks like, and then doing 2 podcasts each week. The On the Corner typical podcast, where we're breaking down as many pitchers as possible each week, about to kick off Nick's Top 100 as it's hashtag ranking season. And then when my 9-month-old daughter lets me get away, trying to see if I can contribute in any other ways via writing, but largely a lot of podcasting right now. But Pitcher List 8.0 going to launch in the next coming weeks. PitchCon coming up soon. So after you're done with all the great content at Friends of Fantasy Benefits, you can come check out some of the stuff we're doing at Pitcher List.
Yeah, you're going to have to binge these 30 team previews in 30 days because PitchCon is coming. And unless you're watching live the entire time, it's going to take you a long time to get through all of those amazing panels, which I will be a part of. I believe my wife will be a part of.
Let's go.
And I even threw out to Nick on my little sign-up sheet and then talked to him while he was on Twitch the other day that I would like to do an Inside the Actor Studio with Alex Fast.
You are... Are you serious?
Yeah.
Justin. Oh my God.
So,
oh my God.
If you don't know, Alex was an actor prior to becoming a baseball mogul. And he did a little thing called TripFlix. You can go to my YouTube and watch the entire TripFlix there for free, as opposed to trying to find the only like 7 remaining copies over on Amazon or something like that. And please go and watch me and Nick break down TripFlix on last year's PitchCon.
You will be very pleased to know that a good friend of mine named Anthony Russo, who I sit next to at work, has one of those TripFlix copies, and he makes sure that all of our employees knows what that is when they walk by. I know yours is right there, isn't it?
I don't know that if you can see, but like right behind my head on my shelf
there it is.
A TripFlix DVD. It is one of my prized possessions. I should have brought it to First Pitch Arizona to have you sign it.
Sure, I'll sign it for you.
Yeah, that I will do next time, or maybe when I'm coming down to LA, since you're now closer to my neck of the woods.
Yeah, totally. I'll say, Justin, keep on tripping. Love it.
Oh, love it. Oh man, that I would get it framed. I would actually get it framed and just put it on the wall, maybe above my bed, like just like right there, so I can look
Danielle
at it.
Would love it.
Yeah, when me and Danielle are having intimate time, I can know. I still have the Colorado Cha-Cha-Cha as my ringtone, which I completely forgot about until I bought a new phone. And then all of a sudden, like I hadn't silenced it because it was a brand new phone, and it went, Colorado Cha-Cha-Cha, Arizona Cha-Cha-Cha. So half of the audience has no idea what we're talking about, but that's okay. Let's jump in and talk about the Baltimore Orioles. Adley Rutschman, like he is a stud.
Mhm.
Are you drafting him this year in fantasy, especially with the depth of catcher this year?
Yeah, I mean, the only like there's we could sit here and talk a lot of positives about Adley Rutschman, right? I mean, he came up and obviously there were some struggles at the very beginning of his tenure, and what honestly made him so appealing to me was the fact that he was able to right that ship, right? I mean, there are countless amount of rookies who come up, don't necessarily succeed, and then continue to not succeed for their first year. I mean, even a guy like Mike Trout came up and he was not good for the first year, and then completely turned it around in the second year. Um, obviously a lot of fantastic metrics that we can get to, not even just the patience, right? 96 percentile and walk rate, but good at making some hard contact. I mean, not the hardest hitter in the world, but he can make some hard contact. Obviously, hits a lot of doubles. I think he set some records for doubles. The one thing that has me a little bit concerned about Adley Rutschman of those platoon splits, right? It got me curious today, and I was looking at WOBA versus right-handed pitchers versus WOBA versus left-handed pitchers, and Adley Rutschman actually led all of baseball in the difference between the two, which I thought was interesting. Now, granted, he's a switch hitter. Maybe they do exactly what they did for Cedric Mullins and they remove that from him and say, guess what? You're just batting righty now, and that's all you're going to do. There's still plenty of room for growth. I still think he's going as what, a top three fantasy catcher right now, right? I don't remember exactly, but if he is, I still think you're probably going to get your bang for your buck even with the platoon splits, even with what Camden Yards has turned into, I'm not really worried about drafting him at the moment.
Yeah, he's currently going off the board as the fifth catcher. Pick
Fifth.
60, pick 64, like pretty much in the exact same spot as Sal Perez. I think that is about right. I mean, it may be a little bit high. I like Rushman a lot, and what I really like about him is one of the things I've been talking a lot about this offseason is with new rule changes, the shift not being as prevalent, pitchers not being having different pickoff rules and things like that. What am I really focusing on? I'm really focusing on contact ability, and that's what
Mm,
Rushman has in spades, right?
mm.
91.5% zone contact for a catcher is elite. I'll take that all day long. I think the power will continue to develop. This O's team is getting better and better. So I think the counting categories are going to be there for him as well. Yeah, I don't have a problem with necessarily where he's going, maybe a little bit high, but especially in a two catcher format, you want a guy who's going to be elite, and I think Rutschman can be elite.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I know this kind of segues into the next guy that you want to talk about too, but I think a like them signing James McCann almost gets me even more interested because when you're talking about catcher, you really want to get plate appearances, right?
Yeah,
And originally, when they didn't have a solid veteran backup, which I do think James McCann is, obviously he's not a great C1, but he's not terrible in deeper AL leagues or in two catcher leagues. I think he's going to free up Rutschman to get a lot of playing time at DH over the course of the year and maybe be a guy who finishes top two or three in terms of plate appearances among catchers. So that's another point in his favor as well.
absolutely. Yeah, McCann is fine. I think he's a catcher three probably.
Mm.
Especially with how deep catchers become, which is crazy to me still. Considering when I started playing fantasy, you couldn't find 3 or 4 catchers you wanted to roster, much less now you've got 20 catchers that are you're willing to roster. So um, let's move over to first base. Talk about Ryan Mountcastle. Is he just kind of screwed because of the new dimensions? I mean, his power really dropped off, and he's never been a big like Statcast hero type of guy. And I just worry that the way they move that fence in left field is just gonna kind of crush him in terms of getting back to 30 home runs.
Yeah, I think 30 home runs, those days might kind of be long gone. I mean, I think it was Sleepy Mike Carlin, who had a really good post today on Twitter about, the power that was kind of being sapped away from Ryan Mountcastle, but also how the batted ball metrics are there, which is what kind of makes it even more frustrating, right? Like he's hitting the ball well, he's squaring it up well, but the power for him isn't necessarily playing over into left field. I will say the one thing that had me a little bit concerned about Matt Castle over the past couple of years is whether or not he was going to be able to get the playing time because of his defensive ineptitude. Right. I remember being at I think it was spring training and then watching him in right and left field and just being like. Wow, like it was like beer league softball. Like he just looked like completely lost. And then obviously they traded away Trey Mancini, and I think this was part of the reason because they felt comfortable with freeing up the DH spot a little bit more, putting Ryan Mountcastle over at first. And he's actually an above average first baseman defensively, which kind of shocked me. Like in terms of outs above average, which obviously every defensive metric has flaws, excuse me, but he's a top 10 defensive first baseman in terms of outs above average.
Wow.
While I wouldn't necessarily say that's like, hey, that's fantastic, it doesn't matter. It just means that he doesn't suck enough that they would have to bench him because of his inability to play first base, right? He is going to be hitting fifth in that lineup, which does make him, all the more appealing. But at the moment, yeah, I think he's a guy that I would probably wait to see if he drops a little bit more. And if it's a team that I have a good amount of power, I wouldn't mind taking him because, yeah, I think he still can supply 20, but the days of 30, I think, are not there for him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Uh, Adam Frazier, why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you kind of he is kind of the utility bat that replaces Rougned Odor for us. He's a guy who can play any position, both in the infield, and you can give him a few on the outfield. And I think they like that defensive prowess and that plug and play with him. Um, that said, is there any legitimate upside from him? I mean, obviously, people are going to point to 2021 where he slashed 305, 368, 411, and that's nice. And I mean, he's a dude who doesn't strike out, right? I mean, if the league average K rate is like what in the high teens, low 20s now, he's got a 12% K rate last year. Of course, it just comes to that 238 batting average. I wouldn't see Adam Frazier as anyone who is worth drafting in virtually any league, even some of the deeper leagues. But he is a dude that's like fun to keep on your radar over the course of a season because if all of a sudden he is hitting 270, 280, that's a guy who could move up in the order a little bit. I don't know if he's ever going to supplant Cedric Mullins as getting any leadoff at bats or anything like that. But in terms of fantasy purposes, yeah, that's a guy that I'm really not paying too much attention to.
Yeah, agreed. Um, is Gunnar Henderson one playing shortstop and two being overrated considering there's some pretty ugly underlying skills?
Yeah, there are definitely sample obviously isn't huge, right? I mean, it's under 150 plate appearances, and while there are definitely some metrics which I think are going to stabilize a little bit quicker, I don't necessarily know if I would be willing to write off the performance because of what is there. I do think that maybe taking him in the top 100, which is where he is currently going right now, is not weighing what could be some downside, right? From what I can see right now, and I usually use NFBC, but as sorted by drafts that started in December. So I try and cut out those like October, November drafts. And there's a good sample, right? There's 124 drafts that have been done in that time. And right now he's going at 89. And that's like right next to Xander Bogaerts, and that's a little bananas to me. Like that's a little bit high for me. Obviously, the sample we got last year, we did get a good, we got 4 home runs, we got a 259 average, but like you said, there wasn't a lot of other things that kind of got you super excited. Obviously, going to be hitting in a good position as he's slated to hit third. In terms of position, there could be an advantage there. You asked if he's going to be the everyday shortstop, and he could be. But it is worth noting that the Baltimore Orioles farm system is like chock a block with infielders. Like they are just loaded to the brim with infielders. Some of them have to be packaged for dudes like, I don't know, Pablo Lopez or whoever they want to try and acquire. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Gunnar Henderson, shift around to third base every once in a while too, and maybe over the course of the year get that multi-position eligibility for you, especially which is going to be good in those, CI, MI kind of leagues, the corner infield, middle infield stuff. That's going to help a lot too. But yeah, that spot right now is a little pricey for me.
Yeah, and I think it's just going to go up. I think that you could see like a Bobby Witt Jr. type of rise where all of a sudden he starts moving into like being a top 60, then top 50, then top 40 type of pick. And there were some real struggles for him against lefties at the majors and in the minors. And so that's my biggest concern is that those struggles continue over to 2023. I I think he's going to start the year at third because isn't Ramon Urias supposed to miss some time coming off of, I think, offseason surgery, and they still have Jorge Mateo. So I think he will get shortstop eligibility, but I think it may take a little bit longer than maybe other people are kind of, because right now Ross Resource has him pegged in as like the starting shortstop. I don't know that he's starting opening day. I think that Jorge Mateo, my boy Jorge Mateo, who
Mm.
finally had a breakout season, we'll get to here in a second, will probably man shortstop at least for the early part of the season before maybe they turn it over to Henderson. What are your thoughts on Mateo? Because he's a guy who, if you needed stolen bases, you got plenty of it. There was some unexpected pop in there too at times. But man, that approach is pretty bad.
Yeah, it's really bad. I mean, it's something where it's like your team, especially in a roto, needs to really be handled that average because I genuinely don't think that average is going to be that much better. Like this isn't a dude. Like maybe you could see something where his speed allows the BABIP to jump up a little bit, and maybe with it comes the batting average. And maybe we're talking about a dude who can hit 235, 240, but that's not what I want to be relying on. I don't want to be relying on his speed beating out infield, singles, right? So he's the kind of guy, like there's a lot of conversation about this over at First Pitch, and I guess I'm kind of curious in your thoughts too. Like, are you comfortable with those handcuffs in these kind of roto leagues, knowing that like, okay, this is gonna hurt my batting average, but it's gonna in a roto, it's gonna give me a shot to win stolen bases. In a weekly, it's gonna give me a chance at a category lockdown every week. What's your methodology there?
If I am drafting Jorge Mateo, something else has gone horribly wrong earlier in the draft. Because
Mm,
I want to be drafting, especially in a roto league, I want to be drafting balanced enough that I don't have to take one category guys later on. The reason you take one category guys is because you're deficient somewhere else.
mm,
I want to find the next Jorge Mateo. I want to find
yeah,
the guy that's not being drafted right now that is going to get into a spot that is going to steal me 30 bases.
yeah,
I don't want, I want to find John Birdie or Jorge Mateo off the wire. I don't want to be relying upon them because what happens is what happened to Miles Straw last year, right? People are taking Miles Straw around pick
mm,
150 and he tanked the rest of your stats. You still got some stolen bases from him, but not as many as you wanted.
yeah.
It hurt your average and it hurt your power because you were taking like a powerless guy and then having to make it up with other guys. Drafting those guys should always be a fallback option, which means you've made a mistake somewhere.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, like there are gonna be guys. What's his name? I'm looking at some of the options. Yeah, interesting one. Now, obviously, it's a different position, but I'm looking at Steamer's projections for stolen bases. And one of the guy who's projected to have the third most stolen bases is Esteury Ruiz, who's one of the
Mm-hmm.
outfielders over in Oakland. He's going outside of the top 300 right now, just outside. And this is a dude who is projected to have a better batting average. And while he might not get literally as many at bats, like if he's playing the way that he's projected to and he's getting that many stolen bases and his average isn't killing you, like you said, that's the guy who's more likely to give you those stolen bases that you need later in the draft. That's one of the guys who could theoretically be next year's Jorge Mateo. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Like I'm the exact same way. I want to be accruing stolen bases kind of round by round. You know what I mean? Getting a guy who's going to get me 10 here, maybe one guy who's going to get me 15 to 20 at most in the first 2 or 3 rounds. But you're right. If it's at a point where I'm like in the kind of doldrums and it's like I really need to reach and hurt my batting average, it's just not worth it. I would sooner wait and see. Because you think about it, I guess the past 2 years, it's always been an Oriole, the surprise stolen base guy.
Yeah.
Maybe there's another.
I don't know who it would be, but it's potentially could be. I mean, it's clearly they're going to let their guys run,
Yeah.
when they get on base. But yeah, for me, I'm not paying the price on a guy like Mateo. It's by the fact I've loved him for a really long time. He's still on some of my dynasty league teams from years and years ago, and I benefited from him last year. Just because you benefited up from a guy last year doesn't mean you should be paying the price a second time. Do we care about Ramon Urias or Luen Diaz or anybody else in the infield there?
No, not really. I mean, Lewin Diaz is just solely kind of a funny story, just anecdotally, because he was like picked up off waivers and then they cut him and then they signed what's his name for Kansas City, the Hearn,
Oh,
I
O'Hearn, Ryan
believe,
O'Hearn,
and then
yeah.
Ryan O'Hearn released this message like thanking Kansas City, saying, "I'm so excited to play in Baltimore." And then the next day, they DFA'd him for Lewin Diaz, who they had just released. So it was all very confusing. But I don't know why they seem to be so interested in Lewin Diaz. They are kind of cycling through these weird backup first baseman. Ramon Urias, like, there is still something that's just like, I have a weird obsession with him, solely because I kept track of him when he was playing in, like, I think the Mexican League like 5 or 6 years ago, and he like tore the cover off the ball. So I was really happy to see him come to Baltimore and put up kind of, back-to-back seasons of goodness. I mean, he had a 2.6 WAR last year. That's not terrible considering what he was getting paid. Um, there's nothing really there for Ramon Urias unless you're in a super AL. Maybe you could get him way late and he can give you 15 home runs with an average that doesn't kill you. But like low enough in the order on what probably will be a team that's not an offensive juggernaut, that all he's going to provide you is an okay average of a handful of home runs, and a lot of guys can get that for you nowadays.
All right. Let's move into the outfield. And when we talk about Baltimore outfielders and Justin Mason, we talk about Cedric Mullins, who, he regressed. We all knew he was going to regress from the 30-30 season, but he was still pretty damn good. Why do people still
Mhm.
disrespect my boy Cedric Mullins?
I honestly think and maybe it isn't just an anti of this bias, but I do think there is still an Orioles bias that is associated with this kind of stuff, right? Like I think a lot of people hear the Baltimore Orioles and they automatically think that this isn't a team where there's going to be a lot of fantasy value. And yeah, I mean, like you said, there was regression, and we knew the regression was going to come. I don't know if we necessarily thought it was going to be as steep as a 258, but I really do think that that is kind of uh, the batting average floor for him. I mean, yeah, the expected batting average was 232, which doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence. But the BABIP regressed as well. This is a guy who has historically put up an over 300 BABIP for him. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that jump back over 300 and for that average to rise up to around 260, 270 again. I think we kind of might be far removed from the 291 days. But listen, if you're getting a guy who is going to almost be a lock for at least a 15-15 season and could very well give you a 2020 season, who's going to be leading off, who's going to have a lot of offensive weapons at least around him where he's going right now, that's good. I mean, he's going in the top 50 right now, which puts him probably in the 15 or 20 outfielders. I'd have to take a look. But I can
14.
understand
Yeah.
why. 14. I can understand why, because like we said, if that's even if he doesn't overload you in one category, that's the perfect guy for a team like you and I want to draft, because there's balance across the board. It's someone who's contributing in each of the categories that you need, and he's not going to put you in a deficit in any single one of them. And he's going to allow you to take more risks a little bit later on with power or with average, because he's going to give you a relatively high floor that you can work from.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get 15 homers, you're going to get 30 stolen bases. I agree. I think the batting average comes back up a little bit, not back to 291, but like 270. I think it sounds right. He's going to lead off. Like, there's just nothing to dislike about Cedric Mullins. Plus, that smile. That smile
It's
is like it's league winning.
100%, and that's really what wins you leagues at the end of the year. Is
Yep,
that grin? Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
absolutely. I know I'm biased, but I'm going to continue to ride that wave. Another guy, Baltimore Orioles outfielder who had a breakout season with Anthony Santander, who was fantastic. Is he going to be able to repeat what he did in 2022?
I mean, he made a lot of huge strides in a lot of big ways, right? He boosted up his barrel rate like almost 40% in terms of percentile rankings, went from the 49th percentile in barrel to the 82nd. He upped that max exit velocity, which I think there have been some really good studies done by Alex Chamberlain that that's just going to correspond with a little bit more power. If you can set new highs in that max exit velocity, obviously that's going to correspond with a little bit of a rise in hard hit rate, although not too drastic, which is a little bit surprising. These are changes that I'm willing to buy into. I mean, if all the things about Camden Yards really just kind of go by the wayside when you're talking about Anthony Santander. 30 could not happen again, but even if he gives you 25 with an okay average, and again, where he's sitting in the lineup, he's going to be able to give you, excuse me, a good amount of runs and ribbies. I don't think overall the regression is going to be super severe. So yeah, I'm buying into the power changes, and I think where he's going right now is actually a place I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, I do too, and I actually think he can, actually have, some growth in the batting average department. I mean, he got kind of
Mhm.
unlucky in that BABIP, 248 BABIP. He's not gonna be a high BABIP guy, but 248 seems extremely low for a guy who hits the ball as hard as he does. Made, improvements in zone contact last year. I was big on him coming into last year. I'm gonna be big on him, coming into this year. I'd say, high 20s, low 30s homers with like
Mhm.
a 250, 255 kind of batting average, which is fine for where he's going. Um, okay, so Cedric Mullins broke out in 2021. Anthony Santander broke out in 2022. Is this the year of Austin Hayes?
I don't think so. I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I wasn't necessarily encouraged by the lack of progress that he made last year. Actually, in many ways, he kind of took a step back. And I also worry if he is just the first on the chopping block when it comes to playing time, right? I mean, you already have guys like Kyle Stowers who are allegedly going to start the year at the DH, maybe going to platoon a little bit, but there are, a good amount of guys that are in the minors that could, theoretically come up relatively soon and make an impact. I mean, not just dudes that were drafted. Like I don't think Colton Cowser is really anywhere close. I think he's probably another year or two away. But I think it's important to remember that, you know, Nomar Mazzaro was signed. Frenchie Cordero was signed. Those are dudes who obviously have plenty of holes, but like if any of them get hot in the minors, if the Orioles system is able to tweak them and introduce more power to them, those are real threats to him. And if there's any outfielder who's going to lose playing time, it's Austin Hayes. Now that's a lemon gloom. But from a fantasy perspective, like there are other guys who seem to have higher upsides right now than what he has shown an ability to repeat, right? He's repeated around a 250 average. He's repeated around a 300 OBP. He's repeated around a 20% K rate, repeated around a 5% walk rate. The power obviously took a little bit of a dip because of the changes in Camden, and he's not really giving any stolen bases. And you have to figure with where he's dropped in the lineup, the runs and the ribbies fall off. So honestly, he's still going in the top 300 in terms of outfielders. I think there's better, higher upside plays, and I think there's a lot of risk involved that I'm probably out for Hayes.
Any of these prospects making a debut that we should think about drafting? Kobe Mayo, you talked about Colton Cowser, Heston Kjerstad we saw at AFL. Any of these guys, Jordan Westberg,
Mhm.
any of these guys you think could be up early?
Um, Not early because I think they are going to want to play the service time game with virtually all of them. So I don't know if these guys that are necessarily going to break camp. It wouldn't surprise me if what we see right now in Fangraphs is what is going to break camp, especially because I do think Grayson will break camp in the rotation. Um, so I don't know. I guess if there was a chance, you could probably see Cowser being one of the guys. I mean, if you look at their bench right now, it's kind of filled with a good amount of infielders and then like some kind of util outfielders, with Adam Frazier being another guy who can swing out there. Jorge Mateo, I don't think you really want to risk him in the outfield. Ryan McKenna has had a good amount of opportunities. So maybe the only reason I say that is if they're going to pull from the minors, it probably is going to be someone who isn't a Kobe Mayo, because I don't know if they need the infield help. Heston Kjerstad still needs a little bit of a ways to go. So, yeah, I guess if I had to guess, Colton Cowser would probably be the one who would be most interesting to me.
All right. Let's move into the starting rotation where you have a lot of guys. I mean, we'll get to like the really, really interesting guys, but Kyle Gibson, Kyle Bradish, Dean Kremer, Tyler Wells, right now are Fangraphs projected top 4. Are any of them stand out to you as someone you're like, ooh, that's who I want to get?
You know that like phrase like "let go and let God." Like that's kind of how I feel about like the Orioles rotation. I'll say this: there was a really really interesting change that Kyle Gibson made in his final 2 starts, where he changed from a slider to a sweeper, and it really improved the swing and miss that he got. The only reason I say that is there's a chance that a very tepid K rate, which is maintained for seemingly years, could take a smaller jump. And considering his home run issues and how much Camden suppresses home runs, I will say that I am at least interested in taking a look at him at the very, very end of drafts. And in deeper leagues, I'm even more interested. And in AL only, I think Kyle Gibson could be a serviceable $1 play for you. I really think there's a good opportunity there for him, um, solely because of those changes. The rest, listen, it's easy for me to sit back and be like, what is going on? Like, yeah, sure, there were promise in each of these things, right? Dean Kramer had promise. Tyler Wells had a lot of promise. Kyle Bradish had his moments. Um, the Orioles showed a little bit last year that they can kind of, can you swear on this podcast?
Yeah,
That they can,
absolutely.
thank God, that they can kind of, shine shit a little bit. They can turn shit into gold a little bit, right? Like the changes that they made with Austin Both were like, okay, sure, we have a little bit of a serviceable starter here, right? Um, they did that a few times, so I don't want to like fully go ahead and write them off, but I don't think there is a single one of these that in like a standard 12 teamer of the 4 that you just mentioned that I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna bump them up my rankings a little bit. Tyler Wells, like again, there were moments. There are moments for Wells. There are moments for Kramer, but not enough of those moments to make me think that's it. Like I'm walking away from my 12 teamer and I'm having those guys in my rotation. There's just there
Yeah,
for me at the moment.
yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna say some nice things about 2 guys. One, Kyle Gibson. I've loved
Okay.
him forever. And
Mhm.
aside from the change, you get the park and you get a pretty nice opening schedule where I think he starts with the Rangers, but he ends up missing the Yankees
Mhm.
series that's early on in the season as long as the rotation stays in order. Now, obviously, rotations can change, especially early on, especially if they go to a 4-man. And so he's a guy that in a deeper league, I might take a gamble on just for the early season kind of schedule, kind of mix and match and things like that. Uh, I am a little bit of a fan of Kyle Bradish.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
he made some kind of gains at the end of the season. I think the home run rate will continue to be palatable, especially in Baltimore. And so I'm a little bit interested in Bradish. Now, that being said, I just sorted my ranks right now, my starting pitcher ranks. Um, Outside of Grayson Rodriguez, who I have as a top 60 starter, I only
Mm,
have Kyle Bradish in my top 120 out of Baltimore. So that kind of
mm.
tells you where I'm at on the Baltimore rotation. So let's talk about Grayson
Yeah.
Rodriguez.
Yeah. So I mean,
When do you think
real
he's
quick,
up?
I think the Bradish thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I think
Go ahead.
he's up to start the year. I think he's up to start. I'm cutting out as much as I think I might be, but if I am, I
Mhm.
apologize. Um, One last note on Kyle Bradish. I do think what you said is interesting. I mean, when you're going back-to-back shutouts over 8 and 7 innings against the Astros and the Guardians, there's something there. The cutter slider combination is interesting. So you're right.
Hmm.
There could be something that's kind of like fascinating about him, and maybe he is a guy that takes a step forward. For Grayson, I think with what happened last year, he has to break camp. Like, also, if he isn't, who is? Like, like, what are they gonna do? Like, maybe put Voth back in. Like maybe man, be very frustrated if they decided that they wanted to start him in the minors, especially considering he was ready last year. Everyone in the front office knew he was ready. It seemed like it was inevitable that he was going to be called up, and then the injury happened. I will say this though, I am probably not going to have him rostered on my teams, except for one where he's in like a dynasty format, and I already kind of have him on the team. Um, I always think these kind of rookie pitchers are overhyped to start, right? We're always looking for the guy who is going to have that Steven Strasburg beginning to the year, and it just so happens. I'm prone to get into rookies when they've kind of been weaned in the way that the Rays used to do it. Like I really like the methodology of like let him be a middle reliever first, let them get settled with their stuff at the bottom of the lineup, just to like get comfortable, find their ground at the big league level, and then start them. I just don't know what the growing pains are going to look like for Grayson Rodriguez. Call it my like Orioles pen, call it what you will. He has nothing left to prove at the minor league level. Nothing. I firmly believe that. The arsenal is there. I can understand why he's a top 5 prospect in all of baseball. Now it's just about the things that are totally out of our control. How does he deal with the pressure? How does he deal with the ability to step up in big situations? Can he recover immediately when he gets guys on base? And if he has a bad start, can he wash it away? Things go by the wayside. Those are the guys that I think lose you leagues more so than the leagues, because, like we said, they're intangible. So I'm excited, I'm cautious, and I don't know if I'm taking him where he's going right now in drafts.
I think that's very fair. I hope they let him start the year in the majors. I really do. Like you said, there's just nothing left for him to prove, and why waste bullets in the minor leagues? It just wouldn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
Especially,
I'm with you.
do you want your? I mean, your opening day starter is going to be Kyle Gibson. Like, just like give the fans something to go to the park for.
That's it. If they, honest to God, if they make Grayson Rodriguez their opening day starter, I might have to fly out to Baltimore. Like that would be
Oh,
so amazing if they did that. But I think what they want to do is make it, and this is not a joke, the highest paid player on the Orioles roster, Kyle Gibson, $10 million. He's the highest current paid player currently before all the arbitration. He's probably going to be their opening day starter. It's wild to me. Wild.
yeah. I'm sorry. Um, uh, let's move to the bullpen. Felix Bautista is the clear guy, it seems. Any worries about him as a full-time closer? And then if something were to happen to him, who's next up?
When does this go live?
Probably Thursday.
Perfect. So by now, I was fortunate enough to be on MLB Now to do my top 10 relief pitchers on MLB Network. Felix Bautista was my number 5. And honestly, I might have been able to go a little bit higher. I am in. I am very excited. Saris has the Stuff Plus numbers published for subscribers to The Athletic inside of one of his articles. And if you look there, you will see that 2 of the like top 5 overall pitches in baseball that are thrown over 500 times belong to Felix Bautista. I believe it's his splitter that is the nastiest pitch in baseball, just by Stuff Plus, and his four seamer is a top 5 four seamer in all of baseball as well.
Wow.
I think he is. It's not just velocity; it's also release point. He has the highest release point in all of baseball. He releases that four seamer 7 feet above the ground, coming in at a top 5 velocity. The splitter is just absolutely filthy. It's so funny to look back and think that people were upset that we traded Jorge Lopez so Felix Bautista could get the opportunities that he did. I am fully all in. I don't care that he pitches for the Orioles. I still think they're going to be better than people are anticipating, but I also don't buy into the fact that you don't take a solid closer from a poor team. They still get plenty of saves. To answer your other question, it would be I think by committee. Dylan Tate has shown a lot of really good stuff in the past season. The reunion of Michael Givens, I really, really like, because Michael Givens still has some really good stuff and is familiar, certainly, with being the closer inside of Baltimore, as he held that for quite some time. I mean, last year, he was to put up 10% strike rates on all three of his pitches. Now, that's a little bit of a cheat because it didn't get much higher than 10% on any of those pitches. It was like at 10% for all of them. But still, he could still get a good amount of swing and miss in that four seam and slider combination. If it isn't one of those guys, I would look at Nick Vespi, who I think is, as long as the surgery that he had, I think it was a hernia surgery, as long as he can recover well from that, I think his stuff is really, really good, and he could be a kind of sneaky holds guy over the course of the year that might get some opportunities with a Batista injury.
Wow, that's awesome. You just talked me up on Batista because I kind of had him in the middle pack, and now I'm gonna have to be putting him up in my top five
Let's go.
for my closer ranks. So I appreciate that, Alex. I appreciate you for joining me. As always, it's just a pleasure to talk baseball with you.
I didn't even know we were recording. I thought we were just having a conversation. I thought it was just you
We
and
were.
me.
This is just for you and me.
You are, I stand by this. I would say it to your face. I would say it to people when you aren't even present. You are the hardest working person in this industry, and I appreciate you having me on, my friend.
Well, I appreciate you making time to come and talk to me. Remind everybody again where you can reach social media and to plug everything you guys got going on at Pitcher List.
Yeah, so you can find me over on Twitter at AlexFast8. I can't I don't think I can make an announcement yet on this podcast about this big thing that I'm working on that I have coming up, even if it comes out on Thursday. But I would just say that check her next week, and they're very excited to put out into the world that I think some people might be interested in. I call that a little tease, something to look forward to.
And you can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. Email me the show, friends of fantasy benefits at gmail.com. I write daily at Fangraphs. I'm on the Sleeper in the Bus podcast. I'm doing these 30 team previews in 30 days. And I've got the TGFBI podcast, this other stuff too. Oh, give us a 5-star review. Really helps us out. And it gets you entered in to win a free RotoWire shirt. I'm going to be picking a 5-star review at random over the course of the next 3 months up to the start of the season, and giving away a shirt every month. So definitely give us a 5-star review. It really helps us out. For Alex and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.